Cloud. This is running correctly. Awesome. Okay, so Samson, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself? Tell me what you're doing, where you're located, what kind of work you're doing, and what you would like to be doing if you want to change things up.
Okay. My name is Samson. I am from Lagos, Nigeria. I currently work as a product designer. I have over 3 years of experience in the field, having worked with so many companies, both local and international. Currently, I'm out of this job, but I'm running my freelance gig, working with clients, different clients from all over the world. Um, yeah, having worked with different clients, different people, it has helped me to, improve as a person and also improve my skills and how I approach different design problems or yeah. Um, Other than design, I'm not sure what else I'll be doing because when I was in school, when I was in university, it was more about learning how to code, learning Java, HTML, and CSS. So if design isn't like, if there's something else I want to work on apart from design, it would be being a software developer, basically. So yeah.
Okay, cool. So you work for a company currently?
No. I'm out of the job currently, so I'm just freelancing right now. So yeah.
Okay. Would you like to continue freelancing, or would you like to eventually find a full-time job? What's your goal here?
To find a full-time job and run my freelance business by the side as well. I want to be running it too.
Cool. All right, awesome. Um, Before we jump into your portfolio, what would be most helpful for you? Like, why did you sign up for the portfolio review? Like, what would you like me to kind of focus on, so that we can kind of get right into it?
So a little bit of background. Recently, I think I've been out of the job since April. Um, that's April last year. So I've been applying for different international jobs, but uh, sometimes I get interview, I do well in the interview, and after the interview, they will tell me that my experience is not enough for the role, majorly because it's a more of senior leadership role in which I'm very sure that I'm up for that because having 3 years of experience is no joke at all. And I've worked with different people. I've taken ownership of some of the works I've worked on. So when clients, or should I say, hiring manager check through my portfolio, they they want to know more, but in knowing more, I don't get a job, basically, especially when looking for a job. In terms of client, I get the gig, then I start working on the gig. But in terms of actually getting a job, it's proving a little bit difficult. Uh, my preference would be to work in a Web3 space or any other space, but my preference would be Web3 because in my last two companies, it was a Web3 company. So I feel like I can go on to the next stage. I can go on to the next stage and work for a Web3 company. But I'm not putting aside other industry as well because I have the experience working in other industry as well. So I'm up for working for any industry. I just need to get a job. So when they check my portfolio, they sometimes they do create a interview for me and I go through the interview, but then they tell me that my experience is not enough. So I want to kind of have a review of my portfolio to see if there's anywhere that I'm lacking that I could actually improve on. So yeah, and when I saw your video on TikTok, I was kind of, okay, can I, then I signed up for this meeting, and yeah, thank you for the opportunity as well. So let me say that as well. So,
No problem. Okay, so it sounds like so can you kind of give me a little background on like the roles that you're applying for? Like, what are some of the interviews that you've had, and what were the roles that you were going for or interviewing
uh,
for?
Mostly I go for mid-level to senior roles because I feel like I'm way past being a junior, and also with my experience as well. Recently I did an interview for a particular company, and it was for a lead role, basically in terms of handling design systems and so on and so forth. I had the interview went great, but I think the last stage of the interview, I was told that I'm not qualified well enough because the role required me having to do like talking with the community for that project because it's a design system to help people. So I have to talk to those people to get a feedback and how I could improve on the company's products, the design system basically. So yeah, so that's just it.
Gotcha. Okay. So let's do this then. Let's focus on getting to that next level of like a mid-level designer. Let's
Okay.
kind of push out. I mean, and tell me if this, like, if you don't agree with this, like, it's totally fine. But let's like get the idea of a senior level designer out of the way, because at that level, from what you're telling me and from what I've looked at your website, your portfolio really quickly, at that level, it's not so much about the hands-on design work. It's more about the working with other teams, being a liaison between your mid-level designers and the marketing, sales, and whatever other teams that might be within the organization. Which I mean, if you have experience doing that, then we can like bring that back into the picture. But that can vary very differently at a lot of different companies. But what I would say with kind of like as a basis for a senior level designer is going to be, or I don't want to say senior level designer because I've been a senior level designer, and this is sort of like kind of getting into the realm of like manager, creative director, or product, director levels. But like they're all sort of grouped together. And I think unless you have experience managing like at least a team of like 2, 3, 4 people and working with other teams and not really focus on making, then that becomes a really big gap that hiring managers or organizations will start to point out and be like, oh, well, you're not qualified.
Okay.
Right. And
Yeah,
so go ahead.
I, I agree. I think my experience is limited in terms of going for the senior role. In my past work, I've had to lead people, no more than 2 people, like interns, basically help them develop, help them grow. And in another company, I've worked with different departments, but it's mostly on a low, basically like not really being out there, being. So I felt like my own thinking was I felt like, okay, I could jump to the next step. So yeah, but I agree with what you said. So
So
we can leave.
let's kind of frame it as like, okay, how do we ensure that when we get into a mid-level position that like you're already starting to position yourself that you're like ready to grow into a senior level, like, so let's kind of like focus on that upper echelon of like a mid-level, so to say, because exactly what you said, like a mid-level designer is like encouraging other members of the team or other member, design interns, whatever it may be, junior designers, and helping them along, helping them grow. You'll get into more meetings, you'll have more conversations with other members of the team, and that's where you start to gain that experience of a senior level designer. And again, like it varies, but like, in my experience, that's where like people from, the hiring manager and the other parts of the team start to recognize that you have that experience to then kind of like be seen or be promoted as a senior level. But if you can't kind of share those experience, like more than 1 or 2 experiences of you doing that, then it just kind of creates a big gap in the hiring manager's like head of like, oh, well, we need someone that has been doing this for X amount of years or has been able to like exemplify this stuff. And like, I'm sure like whatever roles you're applying for are super competitive. So like they might be siding with other, designers or other applicants that have that experience. So let's focus on getting this like mid-level. Let's focus on like really showing like what we can pull out from the projects on your portfolio website, to show that you can like easily take on a mid-level designer, you know, be a great like addition to a team of an organization and grow from there.
All right.
So I'm gonna go ahead and pull up your website, your portfolio. So this is built in Webflow, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, immediately what I thought was it's almost too clean, but like I'm kind of getting that from just talking with you. Like, you know, you're very organized, you're a product designer, you have this sort of mindset of like nice, clean, minimal design. Um, Out of all these projects, which I think they all link out, right? They all link out to like Behance or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which one is your favorite? Which one are you most excited to talk about with people?
The first one, caring for your pets.
Okay. So tell me about this project.
Okay. For this project, I was the lead designer on the project. So I was working for a design agency based in Singapore. So the client came to us like they have an idea and they want to develop it into a product in which helping pets lovers care for their pets. Like from Asia, like parts of Asia, they do love their pets, and being having access to different services or different let's say for product in terms of products like food for their pets, they have to go to different stores to get that. So the client came to us with an idea like they want to have everything in place, like in terms of getting services, in terms of treatments, in terms of getting products for pets. They want to have it just in one place. So they came to us with their idea. So the first step that I went through with the clients was have a design workshop with the clients. I asked different kind of questions just to understand the problem, understand the markets, especially dealing with Asian markets, understand the competitors in that field as well, and also in terms of the brand, how they want their brand to translate to the customers or to the users as well. So I did a run through of that with the clients. Then I did a research of my own, like going through the different competitors, checking out their designs, checking out how and what can be improved on or what can be added based on the client's preference as well. After that, I did the information architecture, like trying to map out the information for the product from start to finish, and I presented it to the clients uh, just to have their input as well and to get the go ahead from them as well. So after that, I started creating my mood boards. I came up with two different design styles in terms of based on the Asian markets and how the designs are being done there in terms of how the designs are being structured, the layouts and everything. So I came up with two design style for the clients, and the clients picked one and I just went with that. So I did the remaining screens for the product from start to finish. I prototyped the whole screen and I handed off to the clients as well. So that is just a quick rundown of the project itself. So yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff here. A lot more information, a lot more text and descriptions that like that I don't see with other portfolio reviews. So this is great. Like you are based in product design. That's awesome to see. Um, what I would say as a note is personally, I think there is a level of and you don't have to worry about taking notes. I'll send notes and
Okay.
everything like that, but you have a nice portfolio homepage, right? And what I think happens, unfortunately, is that when these start to link out to pages like Behance, Not that Behance is bad or anything like that. I think like you probably can attest to like having your work on Behance can probably lead to like clients and getting notice and all that stuff, right? But I think you need to have all of that information on your portfolio website. I think there is something that happens with hiring managers or, like other people who are hiring for positions in organizations where like they get linked out to another page and they're like, okay. And I think there's sort of like a lowered expectation, or their expectation somewhat diminishes when it goes out to another page. It doesn't look like the rest of your website. And I would
Okay.
actually push for you to maybe not build all of your projects into your website, because again, like I think with these portfolio reviews, the one thing I'm advocating a lot is prioritize things that are going to like really benefit you and save you time at this, in while doing them. So like, for example, as we're talking about this like linking out thing, like instead of making all of these link out and going through the trouble of building out pages for all of them, why don't you start with this first page? Start with this project first, get that
Mhm.
all that information from Behance onto this page and design it like the rest of your portfolio website. And the other thing I would say is, as you were talking through this, I think again, this is where like the experience starts to show through of I think you need to practice what you have, like practice talking about this project. For example, like what are like the three big takeaways that you could attest to that you like did during this project? So from what I've heard, one, I was the lead designer working with an agency based out of Singapore. They have a number of clients, and one of their clients was this pet brand, right? That's point one. The second point would be something along the lines of, what the brief was. So the client came to us with with this idea that they wanted to have all of their services in one location. And so we just decided that an app, mobile app would be best because they have such a wide user base. And if you can grab numbers for that, like what their user base is, that would be great. The other big point I think you need to emphasize, and again, this is why practicing it will be really important, because it's like, it's public speaking, it's presenting, right? And so the big one that I think is key is like, so as the lead designer, I was asked to lead the design workshop with the client. I had a team of X, Y, and Z that I was working with. We met with X, Y, and Z from the client's team, and we went through a 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, whatever it was, design workshop to just start brainstorming ideas and really understand where they were thinking, where their ideas were, what they had in mind. After that, after that meeting or that workshop, me and the team went through competitive analysis. We started to get into designing different components and prototyping. So like that's your third point. And then you can get into like all this other stuff, like, hey, we conducted stakeholder interviews, we did market research, like you need to have those really clear, and you need to be able to speak through them very naturally. So I think like, because as you're interviewing, people are going to be judging you based on how you're describing these projects. So being really clear, making sure that you have like the what I would like to call like the big headlines pulled out, right? So like, okay, we did a bunch of market research. After we had all this stuff done, we realized that the market for this is $1.4 billion. And if we could, capture 7% of the market, whatever it may be, like all these things start to come and really show your experience as a designer. I think the other part that like, when you start to talk about like design process. So like once we had all this research done, we got into the designing, we went through wireframing exercises, we presented those to clients to really kind of like get the look and feel correct with them before we went on to user testing. Blah, 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 onboarding walkthrough. So then after you talk about that design process or that initial design process, this is when you start to introduce like some of the more flashy components or more finalized assets that you created. So, before the launch, I was tasked with putting a complete design system together for the app. This is what it looked like. After that was all settled, I was also tasked with narrowing down what the onboarding experience was. And these are the things that I made for it. These are the reasons why. Boom. Solving the main pain point. So then like one big problem out of this whole thing was X, Y, and Z. And this is how we solved that. Adoption process. Yeah. So, I mean, like there's a lot of things in this app that you could probably pull from, and then I would push you to narrow those things down. And for things like, yeah, they offer, it looks like they offer a ton of different services, right? Like, so like, what are the big ones that are like super key, right? I think like people love to always hear about an onboarding experience because like that's a big pain point for a lot of products. And again, like pulling out like one of the key features, but then, you know, like all these other things like checkout process, like take, you know, like some of that stuff could be like, yeah. And also while we went, you know, and also dealing or developing the app, I also handled the checkout process. I also handled the feature for adoption process. One of the things that we saw that we wanted to really make sure was key is how do we drive engagement through with the users that were using this. And then you have your outcomes, right? I know that's a lot because this is like a big project and it's great that it's big. Like that gives you so much more opportunity and like runway to like really figure out for yourself, like, okay, what do I want people to come away with this? And especially if you were the lead designer on this project, like there's so much meat, there's so much good stuff here that you can really like use to your advantage, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree.
um So, I mean, like you have a good problem here, right? You have like so much content, not so much content. You have great content. You have a lot of like good descriptions and stuff like that. Like you've gone through the process of like really articulating your thought. Now you have to practice that and piece it together so that when you're interviewing, it all sounds really natural. Like you can just recall this stuff. Like now when you're going through interviews, are you going through all of your work? Like what are the interview processes for you like?
Depending on the type of job, let's say like the one I told you about, like it's more of a design system role. I went through this particular projects with them, showcasing my ability to come up with a design system. In some other cases, like a Web3 companies, I go through my Web3 projects for them as well. So yeah, but I think the caring for pets is my major go-to whenever I'm going through an interview.
Okay. And I mean, it's good to have the projects that you know immediately relate to, like you're applying to Web3, you have a bunch of Web3 projects. That's awesome. In this instance where like it's a design system, right? Like they're looking for a designer to basically like take a hold of their design system and like really kind of like push this through the finish line. Even though this might not be a Web3 project, like you should be able to recall, like after practicing these projects, you know, practice talking about them and practice going through them, you should be able to recall, well, oh, you're looking for a design system designer? Great. I was the lead designer on this project and I came up with the entire design system for this mobile app. This is what the project's about. Boom, you know, like there you go. That's your like kind of like segue into showing them all of this comprehensive work. But because you'll practice it and because you'll, you know, like sort of memorize the stuff, it'll come naturally for you to be able to use it and bend it in like whatever way that you need to. For example, like I had 3 projects that I always pretty much presented in interviews. Like I had one web project or a couple web projects, maybe 1 or 2, and then like a branding project. And then sometimes I would even include like a passion project and I would switch that out. But I had gone on so many interviews that like talking about all 3 of them was super natural for me. So whenever they were like, hey, do you have any examples of this thing? I could be like, yeah, absolutely. You know, this is a project that I did, but let me show you this project instead, because this is really what you're talking about, you know? And then I would be able to just go through, really cite that, like that specific example or that specific skill that they're looking for. And it would just sort of like come out naturally because I had worked and interviewed with these projects for so long. So I think that's really key. Let's click into this one. Or actually, yeah. Would you say this one's the one we should click into next?
Yeah.
Okay.
So for this one, it's not really in depth like the first one due to the NDA that I signed, but I was able to show little about the projects and to show my ability as a designer as well. So yeah, there's not so much into this because for this project I had to work with a client on a contract basis. So it wasn't uh it has nothing to do with the research part. It's more of designing a UI for them in terms of the features that they want because they already have a product and they wanted to expand in terms of the features that they want on that particular product. So it was more of designing for that features and presenting the work. So yeah.
Okay. That's fine that you're not able to include more copy on this because of an NDA. But at the same time, what I would say is don't rely on that reasoning for, and I'm not saying that you do this, but just as like to say it out loud, like just because you sign an NDA doesn't mean that you can't talk about it in an interview because like things are verbal, they can't necessarily hold you. And obviously, trust your gut on what you're able to say and what you're not able to say if you think these are like direct competitors. But again, same thing with with the previous project. If I think you're like what you mentioned of like this was a project where I was contracted to work on what the future of their products could look like. Like that's a great headline, right? Like I was brought onto this team to really expand this company's product line and how these components can be reused in other ways. Like boom, like so that kind of touches on design systems a bit. Like you're starting to reuse components and like that is sort of what you want to speak to in these instances of like, you're interviewing with a focus on the design system role, whatever it may be. I would say though that when you're presenting in these interviews, are you like looking at your website or do you have like a presentation?
I have a presentation deck that I use. So yeah.
Can you send me that? Let's look at that.
Okay. Let me find that because I wasn't so sure that we're going to. Okay, give me a sec.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. I mean, it's important to like know because I mean, a portfolio review, yeah, we can look at your portfolio. I gave you notes that like you should probably get some of this information from Behance onto your website. But like what's going to be most helpful for you is like trying to figure out how do you get people to understand that you are ready for those mid-level positions. And I can only do so much if I don't understand the tools that you're actually using in these interviews. So I think that would be more helpful unless you don't want to go through that.
Sorry, come again.
I'm saying if you we can like look at your website and I could give you notes on that, but I think like helping you try to figure out how to get to that mid-level designer would be more helpful. So looking at this presentation would be slightly more it would just be better to look at that and give you notes on that as well.
Yeah, I agree. I dropped you a link on the chats.
Awesome. Is it in the chat? Can you send it again?
Okay. Can you see it now?
I can't. Is it in the Zoom chat?
Yeah, Zoom chats.
I don't see it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You can see my messages, right?
Yeah, I can.
Try not to include like, what is it, a .com?
Yeah, it's a link.
Try to just take out the .com and send
Okay.
that. No, it's still not showing up. It's so weird. Okay, just email it to me really quickly. Email me that link. That's so weird. Zoom chat is being weird.
Yeah, send it to you.
Okay, cool. You sent it to John at Call the design guy?
Come again.
Which email did you send it to?
Work with John.
Ah. Okay, there we go. I was like, wow, I'm not getting any links. Interesting. Okay, I have it up. Let's look at this. Okay, love that you're using Figma. I've been recommending it to people more and more as like a way to get presentations together. Really quickly, a side note, are you also sending this to people by chance? Like in job applications, are you sending this like as a part of the application?
No. So
No, okay.
normally, of all the companies I've worked with, when I'm going through the interview, I go through my websites. But for this last job that I talked about, I actually created a presentation for it. So this is the presentation.
No, that's perfect. I would consider adding like 1 or 2 slides before you get into the work, like kind of like a quick resume of like, has your name, has your work experience, like just before you get to the slides, because I could see, like a lot of job applications, you would send in a link to like this kind of deck or something, or your website, whatever it may be. But I think it would just be good just in case. But okay, the contacts, blah, 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 want to create for how users care for their pets. They also want to elevate. And as you're going through this, you're like talking through it, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Just making sure. Objective, blah, blah, blah. What do you have? Is it research, strategize, and design an end-to-end mobile app? Service event, also build brand. Okay. Lacked understanding. What are CUJs? Customer user journeys?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. This is great. This is a great Figma deck.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
I had to come up with it a day before the interview because, like I said, normally I just go through my websites, but I asked people because I knew this particular role was more of a senior role, so I wanted to stand out in a way as well. So I asked people, and all the advice I got was having a presentation deck for the interview. So yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. By providing a set of reusable components, guidelines, product. So what I'm thinking is potentially happening is that you're speaking to a lot of the nitty gritty design. For example, like this alignment and grid, right? I use an 8-point grid system for the project. I set the margin to 16 as to create more space for the product card. All designs are created using constraints and auto layout. That is useless to everyone but us, right? Like no one wants to hear about 8-point and 16-point grid systems except other designers. So you have to be mindful of who you're speaking with and making sure. But like, I would look at this if I was hiring and be like, okay, like these are the details that like no one wants to hear about, but we want to know, like, we just want to know that you're experienced enough to know this stuff, right? Like you don't need to show this kind of thing, these kind of like nitty gritty details to get that point across.
Well, I was interviewed by designers, so I just felt like, okay, this could be included but I get your point as well.
Yeah, I get that. I think like you're doing a good job here of like showing like, like this is a good way to present like, yeah, this is like all of the components that we came up with and that we're using. And then like, that's your technical tidbit, right? There's something with this. By providing a set of reusable components, guiding through the design process, by focusing on the needs and preferences, it can help products. You're like defining what a design system is here.
Yeah. This is just like answering the question from previous slide, like, should we have a design system? So this is me saying that, okay, these are the reasons why I created a design system. I know it's just the normal a generic, or what's it called, design system definition in a way, like how design system works, what is useful for, but then.
Yeah, I think you could do that without a slide. I think you could say like, so you're saying that this was in response to these?
Go a little bit further, like you passed it. No, go, like, I think it's in the front. Yeah.
Here.
Yeah. No, go forward. Keep going. Yeah, this part.
Okay. Do we need a
Because
design system right now? Should we prototype for all screens? Trying to think. It almost feels like there could be like, this could be a pause and like while you're in this interview or like a talk, right? Where like we were on a very tight deadline to deliver on the designs for the MVP. What was our design language? Did we need a design system right now? Should we prototype for all screens? It's almost like too much. There's too much going on here, right? I think me personally, I'm the person that's like, I'd rather have a slide that says like design. And like the headline would be like, to just kind of point it back to this. It's like, we had a tight, like our deadline was like, we had to have this done in 30 days or something, right? And then me personally, like I'd rather talk through all of these points that you're kind of like building slides out for. And this is, again, goes back to like, practicing these, like talking about these projects, because you're like over designing these slides almost, right? Like everything that I'm going to say has to be on the slide, which I don't think is really helping you out. It kind of like in a way almost starts to kind of like take away from your experience, right? So for something like this, like you don't need to have a slide that defines a design system. What you could do instead is going back to this idea of like having a more simplified slide where you can talk about these projects of like, the deadline was in 30 days. And then the question is like, what did we do? Well, I went ahead and presented to the team the idea of a design of a small design system, or like of a design system and why we should do it. They said that their deadline was really quickly. We wanted to be able to prototype, but we weren't sure which ones to do or whatever. So I put together the design system that I'm about to show you to remedy all of these problems, right? Like something along those lines. And then you go and skip this slide, you go into like, and this is the design system I came up with. I put this together in X amount of days. And this allowed us to actually move forward with all these other things that we had questions about. Prototyping, this, that, the other thing, blah, 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 blah. Because then by the time you get to this, like you don't need this. Specific feature flow, provide products and services for pets. Provide products. So I like that you're doing this, right? Like this animation is nice and slick and it looks good. I almost think that like the bigger, again, like what is the big takeaway? What is the big headline here? It's like almost like we made, I don't want to say like we made shopping easy for your pet, or like pet shopping has became easy, but like provide products and services for pet. Like you said that already in the previous slides, right? Like that's what the client came to you for. So like what was the outcome, or how did you improve that? Like, and the same thing with how you would word this. Like, so like we've made a streamlined pet grooming or pet service process, something, you know, like something that changes the language to kind of get people to realize, oh, this is where things improved. For this one, community for information resources, like growing a pet community or growing a community of pet lovers, you know, and then like going into all your bits about what's going on here. Streamlining, you know, payments for services, you know, like again, what are the takeaways here? Like availability of popular payment methods. Great. You're running an e-commerce product. You should have every payment method under the sun, right? Like we, like designers know that, created, like anyone who works in product knows that. But like, where was your improvement here, right? Like, where was that, like, what's that moment that people are going to be like, oh, now I get what they were working on, or like that seems like a step up, you know? Design highlights. So this it's good to have outcomes. This is really great. I want more outcomes. So like outcomes that I think are really valuable to have. Having something from the co-founder is great. I'm not going to read this, but you know, can you provide some numbers here? Like what was like the launch? How many downloads? How many people are using it? How many payments are being processed? I know it's really hard to find that information, but is there some of those bits can you incorporate, right?
Yeah, to answer that question, I'm not sure that the project has been developed yet, because
Okay.
releasing. So there's no way to actually get those numbers. So yeah.
Okay. So then in response to that, can you, like, what are the things that we can think about? Okay. So outcomes, can you bring in a number? So to really emphasize this idea of experience, right? Can you bring in something along the lines of, I worked with X amount of teams, you know, I worked with X amount of people on this. The one thing that I always did when I was trying to go from mid to senior was I always explained what I was doing and the people that I worked with, or the number of people I worked with. So when I was going from mid to senior level designer, I would always start off the interview with a little background about what I've been doing and what I currently do as a senior. My mid-level designer into senior level was like, I was a designer at a snack and beverage brand, leading like 2 or 3 different products. And for people to really understand that I was ready to go from senior, I would tell them, you know, I work currently with 4 freelancers that I manage. I work with 20 engineers across 4 different teams. And I have 4 different product managers also on different products that I work with, and, you know, responsible for making design changes. Right. So immediately I have that experience. And then I would also tell them that, like, I also work with, you know, marketing and sales and this, that, and the other thing, you know? So like, can we take some version of that, put it into this idea of outcomes, or even like, can you just use that at the beginning of your interview processes, interviews to really lead that idea of like getting ready to level up?
All right.
So any other questions or anything like that you want to go over before we sign off?
Uh, okay. Thank you for the feedbacks. I think I actually agree with everything that you said in terms of me practicing more on my presentation, number one, and like you said, having outcomes like headings that catch attention in terms of everything that we've gone through and talked about as well. But my question will just be, let me think. What do you feel if you are what's it called, hiring manager, seeing my work, seeing my portfolio, what would be the first thing that comes to mind, like in terms of, let's say, for a job, for a mid-level job?
Um, I would say this. You have design skills. You have great design skills, right? You can make stuff. Awesome. You're good in that department. Now it's time to work on the other stuff of like presenting, showcasing that experience. That's where I think is the improvement opportunity for you. Your design skills are there. You can talk about like your being able to workshop, being able to lead those sort of opportunities and those initiatives. But what I see potentially where you're struggling is just that being able to like feel really confident as you're talking through projects and being able to really kind of like voice your experience. So like, don't focus so much on like the showing your expertise of like, yeah, we have an 8-point grid system and 32 pixels here and like all that stuff is really nice and clean. You've done a great job on that stuff, right? Now let's focus on like really getting people to understand how you've used that experience to grow as a designer. All righty. You have my email. One, I want to make sure, I just want to make sure really quickly, if anything, again, like back to this idea of like, I want you to prioritize the things that are going to get you the most value immediately. After looking at that presentation, I would say that is like your priority one. Make sure that's starting to feel really good. Think about those slides and practice walking through your projects before you get to those things that we talked about with your portfolio website, right? That's doing its job. It's getting you interviews. Let's get that presentation looking really good and getting you to really feel confident talking through it. One other thing, you'll get an email from me in about 5 minutes with like just a quick link to a couple of questions. That link ultimately, those questions ultimately decide where I should send the notes and the link to this recording. Okay. So as soon as you can get that done, the faster I can get the notes over to you. Alrighty.
All right, no problem.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Samson. It was great meeting you. I think you're going to do some really cool stuff and I'm looking forward to hearing from you soon. All right, man.
All right, no problem, man. Thank you for taking the time to go through this with me as well. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. No problem at all. Have a good one, man.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.